Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahi Tejasvinavaditam Mastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May our study be illuminating and full of vigor. May we have vigor anyway. May we also not unnecessarily cavil with each other. And peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this is the Vedanta series, question and answer. As usual, I begin with a statement. If there are no questions, there are no answers. So I'll pause a little bit for any question to come.
Thank you, my pranam. My question is, simultaneously with the practice of contentment, how can we keep up our aspiration to do better?
Okay. So the quality of contentment is a necessary requirement in the whole of spiritual life, not only from the yoga philosophical point of view or practice point of view, but also it is a requirement in all of those scriptures. We can reinterpret the word contentment with thankfulness, because if you're thankful, you're content. It's discontent occurs when you feel something is missing and something has to be added. So the answer is very simple. We should be thankful. What should we be thankful for? All the things that we normally don't observe properly. So today is a beautiful morning here in Ireland. Should we be thankful for it? There is an entity that remains awake while we sleep, repairing all our cells, digesting our food, sorting out all our problems and issues, fulfilling our wishes and dreams, giving us guidance from the unconscious area, presenting us with an investment of life breath and a specific purpose that only we can accomplish. And even if somebody is put on the gallows, that Lord doesn't withdraw his investment. The nails still grow, the hair still grows. We ourselves may be in a despairing mode with regards to people that we feel should hang on the gallows or something like that. But the Lord of the universe never gives up. So this is an area that we have to increase. Thankfulness is really the key to devotion. If we are to love God and have no idea what is God, just a kind of concept. There was some discussion I saw earlier in the week with regards to ontological arguments. Ontological arguments means, can we have any logical evidence for a God? And so there was a famous 11th century Bishop of Canterbury, who presented what he thought was a watertight ontological argument. Then he realized maybe it wasn't, so he produced a second one, the great saint. But there are other saints who disagreed with him. And the reason for that is that people think that the whole of life is a progression, a series of events, causal events. Even the great theologian Thomas Aquinas, Christian theologian, puts it in that way. He puts 5 propositions. The one proposition is very similar to the Vedantic proposition. Things are moving. If things are moving, there must be an unmoved mover behind it all. Because you can't have an infinite series, causal series going back. But this is looking at things in a linear way, not in a cyclical way. If you look at things from a cyclical point of view, then what becomes cause and effect is more like the Sankhya philosophers put it. That is that the effect is nothing more than the gross manifestation of the cause. And the cause is no more than the subtle manifestation of the effect. Something like a wave in an ocean. The cause of a peak of a wave is a dip. And the dip is caused by a peak, and so it goes on. But one substance is there called ocean. So if we view it in this way, we look out at life, people, places, events, objects, things which are seen, things which are heard, in the so-called external world, and we can surely see some beauty there. We can surely see it as a free gift to our eyes, to our ears, even the provision of breath, the chemical composition of air, giving us oxygen, provided in turn by plants, provided in turn by their response to the rays and waves of the sun. All of this is an opportunity for thankfulness. And when we feel thankful, then we feel content. And along with that contentedness comes faith that things are correct. They don't need correction. So any language in spirituality which infers there must be a progression or there must be some kind of advance in spiritual life is fundamentally erroneous. It's a good starting position, it's not a good finishing position. A good starting position will give some motivation for doing something. And motivate in order to get something. So 3 types of devotees are described in the Bhagavad-Gita. The one who has a desperate condition. You can't get out of it through any normal means, beyond the realm of practical life. So we seek something which is beyond that, outside that. And Anselm's argument was, if you can imagine something that is the greatest of the great, even by imagining such a thing, it must mean that it is, if there's a real existence, it must be at least that. By looking at the superlative qualities of something, you'll get to the thing itself. So there are many, many clues within this existence of life that gives us an opportunity to say, what we are seeking is actually here and now. The starting point is to say, I'm desperate, so I need something externally to fill it in, to rescue me, to lift me up. But soon we realize that's not working fully because there's no end to our blanks. There's no end to our feeling of discontent. So every time we find a difficult situation, we run to poor God, who's no doubt inundated now with many, many cosmic emails, bothering him nicely and saying, please rescue me because my small toe is hurting, or my bank account went down, or people don't like me at work, or whatever it is. Or a discontent in, I have a house, I want a better house. I have reasonable health now, I would like better health. I have a nose, it is a certain shape. Unfortunately, you gave it to me, or you gave me parents with XY chromosomes that gave it to me, but I need to change it. It needs to be better. You made a mistake. And some people think that a nose is better on the back of the head. Maybe you want that. Cosmetic surgery being available, maybe you can do that. So if you say that the great quality to be cultivated is contentment, it starts from a position, I'm not content. I don't have it. I need to get it. But as soon as you realize that behind everything, equivalent to the example of the Sankya's causal position of a wave with a peak, a cause, the effect is the same in effect as the causal wave. That the cause and effect is only on the surface of life, and that beneath it is only one ocean. That's not exactly a Sankhya position, but when you meet or when you join Sankhya with Vedanta, you have one system like that. And then the advantage of that one system is that all fear goes away and all contentment is fulfilled. There's no question, when will I be content? As long as you know I am that contentment is already there. Now, you may not know it as directly as that, but you can know it by the evidence that you see. Again, using the eyes, the ears, all the senses, you can appreciate what is there. And then add to that the element of faith, that nothing has come and nothing is gone. In other words, there is no linear system. The difficulty in Western thinking, as it is now in a contemporary way, and also as it was in Swami Vivekananda's time, is that evolution is seen to be an outcome of something, an outcome of space and time, not understanding space and time itself is the evolution. That you cannot get, as Swami Vivekananda put, intelligence at the end if it wasn't there in the beginning. If intelligence is not there in the electron, it won't come out in the brain. So there's a whole totality of vision. Many Sundays I talk about this totality, a shift of position where we see the whole thing. We are constitutionally, dimensionally deficient. Our deficiency is that we have a limitation in the range of our sense organs and therefore in the range of our thinking, because we cannot conceive of anything outside of that range. So we have to make various abstract symbols for what we can't comprehend. Then, if that's the case, we have to acknowledge these limitations and try to understand it through totality and look for some examples. And previously, I have two favorite examples that I give. Just for the sake of repetition, I can give them again. So imagine now that there is, and you put it in a humorous way. Well, I'll give you three examples actually. One, of course, is not my own. One is attributed, some say to the Buddhist tales, some say to the Hindu tales. In any event, Sri Ramakrishna himself also tells it. It's a very well-known tale about the totality that we call an elephant. Some elephant is there. And blind men come to go and assess and discuss what is the nature of this elephant. Of course, they are deficient in their sight. But we are also deficient in our inner sight, in our instinctual sight. And all of this knowledge, whether it be on the knowledge of physics or knowledge of spirituality, all of it is from instinct. How is it that the ancient philosophers knew about the atomic structures? How is it they knew about the subtle elements that we unfortunately misinterpret as ether or space or wind or air or any of these things, or heat or fire or water or earth? So all of these are misunderstood terms. They knew about radiation, they knew about liquefaction, they knew about solidification without the use of microscopes, without the use of telescopes, without the use of any of these things. Knowing all these astronomical bodies without the use of telescopes, imagine. So what did they use? They used instinct. Now, if we are to do the same and cultivate and fine-tune our own instinct, then we have to be aware of some shift within us that occurs when eyes, ears, and so on are operating. Anyway, taking for granted that the range of our understanding will be beyond all the sense organs. Let's take the example of the blind people with the elephant. And one declares, elephant is like an enormous pipe. One is like a huge banana leaf. One is like a rope. Feeling the tail, he says it's like a rope. Feeling the ear, he says it's like a plantain leaf. Feeling the trunk is like a huge pipe or a huge channel in which water passes and so on. One feels the skin, one feels the leg and says, oh, it is like a solid pillar. So all of these positions are all accurate in their own way as interpretations, but all inaccurate from a fully sighted totality. So having a great debate about what is an elephant and seeing this disagreement, and you can use it in a number of different contexts. The context Sri Ramakrishna uses it in is in relation to what is this thing called God? Some people say it's this, some people say it's that. But we can use it in a sense of a totality. The sighted person, equivalent to the one who has cultivated a sense of instinct and knows, sees a totality and says, all of you actually are incorrect from a totalitarian point of view. Actually, the whole thing is elephant. Now, it raises an interesting concept, because if you think of an elephant in its totality, you won't have the totality. You'll have an elephant, but beyond the elephant is another background. And you can go on like that, almost perpetually, forever. So how do you grasp the totality? You cannot. In an objective way, you can never do it. But you can cultivate a sense of contentment that this totality is present. And you can cultivate a sense of contentment that what is behind everything as a totality is moving you forward in a confident, assertive way. You can have confidence that the future is looked after, that the past was very useful, and that the present is a presentation of this current now, which is a full totality, and presented in such a way that we appreciate glimpses of it, such as beauty, truth, goodness, love, harmony, that we can appreciate when we look at a tree more than just a familiar object dismissed as soon as we see it, replaced by other things. We can look at something with a great deal of care and be thankful that we are born for a specific purpose, and go even more than that and take a great joy and delight in this role that we are issued with. And we can feel then an internal uplift. So something that is not just thankfulness in a polite sense, but something that is an internal shift, an internal movement that moves the whole of our energy upward. And when we do that, we're actually going beyond this mere linguistic interpretation of the word shocham or contentment or something like that. In fact, St. Paul will describe it as the peace that passeth all understanding. Imagine that. That is a contentment you can never come to grips with. So you learn to cultivate it to start with, and then it has a life of its own. It takes over. It overwhelms you. That in itself then is an advancement, a movement forward. Cultivating all these qualities is only a starting point. Ultimately, the quality itself, which is a thing, not just a property, but belongs to something, itself starts taking over and then lifts you forward and on, like a stream, like a huge current lifting you forward. The second example will be a totality unseen by frogs in water with a certain deficiency. So a certain constitutional dimensional deficiency, that is, there is no vertical vision, only horizontal vision is granted to us. What we see in this world is only an interpretation of what is there. It goes way beyond that. Just as when we see a totality of an elephant, it's also limited by its form. It infers there's something way beyond there. The elephant, if you compare it to God, would be just our limited seeing of something that is, even in its limitations, described as a God with all the properties and aspirations of omniscience, omnipresence. Anything that has properties would be temporary. So we don't take God as an absolute, by the way. We take God as a temporary being, and this whole cyclical operation, rather than a linear position, will just come, will go, will repeat itself. And in this repetition, a new God is born with a new, but we are talking of eons and eons of time, of course. So is there something even beyond that? Yes. Incomprehensible? Yes. Will we get close to it? Yes. Will we get close to it by devotion to God? Yes. What is the formula? Incredible increase in a thirst for God. That discontent is a healthy discontent. And that discontent yields as a reward, as a flow toward us, a sense of totality, a sense of completeness. So these frogs in water are trying to explore what is the totality that we call a cone. A professor introduces it into the water, first a small point, and the frog scientists, we can't question, how can frogs be scientists, knowing it is only a story, start recording, Mr. Cone was born as a point, and this was the time at which he was born. Then as the cone gets introduced more and more into the water, it evolves as a pot-bellied thing. And then they measure the circumference and so on, make faithful recordings. And as the professor is introducing the cone gradually over time in the water, they see that there's a graph that is emerging. On one axis is time, on another axis is change. And they faithfully record this, each circle being recorded in terms of its dimension and the time it took to evolve. And then finally the cone disappears. It is only somebody with external vision, let's say the professor itself, that understands this totality called cone and understands it was never born, it never evolved in time, it never changed. There was a totality there which was never understood by somebody with dimensional deficiency. Our dimensional deficiency is we only have 5 ways of looking at things, therefore 5 interpretations. And if we don't go beyond there, then we're stuck. The exercise of going beyond there is called spiritual life. That spiritual life and spiritual endeavor, we need to accept as a step-by-step process. You can't just have 2 speeds, stop and go. There has to be some intermediate process. There has to be an element of patient progression, allowing things to unfold by themselves. So therefore, Krishna says, people in desperation praying for something, that's one kind of devotion and expression, and it doesn't nullify spiritual life. It's a good starting point, but not a good finishing point. Then what about somebody who is discontent because what they have needs, in their view, improving or advancing, some kind of progression in life? Then they will also engage in spiritual practice, prayer and the like. But ultimately, the person who understands the totality understands that existence itself is here. It's not something to get. You don't look for a king to come. The king is already here. When will the king come? Already here. And what is the absolute formula for this? Thankfulness I mentioned. Faith I mentioned. We can review it. Thankfulness in the things that we missed. Thankfulness for a free flow. Loving God because God is lovable. Why? Because God is a pouring entity, pouring his own life through us, investing, even in the person on the gallows. Second, faith. Totality means that the future is taken care of. The past is already gone and has a usefulness. And the present is where we catch it. If we forget to catch it now, then we won't be content. If we catch it now, we'll be completely content. Content, why? Because we won't have a partial vision. The whole totality is presented here, now. We can catch it now. When you do that, contentment comes, and cultivating that contentment yields an automatic surge in spiritual life. We don't have to think what becomes of my spiritual life on the one hand if I can't cultivate contentment on the other. One leads to the other. And eventually the contentment is there because it's there, not because there is a deficit somewhere. There's no deficit. Everything is complete. Now, how to see that? We have to see this totality everywhere in all beings. And it's described philosophically as seeing the self in all beings, that thing that doesn't change. What Anselm was, what Thomas Aquinas was registering as the first principle in the argument is the regard. He wasn't using it in that sense, but his first thing is to do with the unmoved mover. The unmoved mover. Seeing things change, something must be there that is changeless. Can we catch it? Now on when was it, Wednesday, I was talking to the Northern Ireland group, Belfast and other places in Northern Ireland, and I made reference to the principle that is laid out in the Bhagavad-Gita, the great philosophical portion, which is so important that it is actually termed as the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, that is actually termed in a separate book, the last message of Sri Krishna. It's translated and edited by Swami Madhavananda, who was at one point president of the Ramakrishna Math Mission and also general secretary. So he makes this wonderful translation, and I referred in my talk to the almost the last section of this chapter, and that is the 24th section. The conversation is with Krishna's disciple Uddhava, and this is mentioned and we can start from the 8th verse on that chapter. It says, the Lord said, well, I should tell you some excellent forms of religious practice, spiritual practice, concerning me, that is the highest principle, practicing which with faith a man can conquer invisible death. Then he goes on. With a pure mind, jumping to the 12th stanza, with a pure mind one should observe in all beings, as well as in oneself, only me. Supposing you make that observation and then raise a question, when will I be content? It becomes an irrelevant question. When he says me, he's saying what? The Atman, who am both inside and out. So there's no creation there, and there are no gaps there. There's nothing to get. If something's inside and out, there's a totality, nothing to gain and nothing to get, no deficit. And unobstructed like the sky. In case we have any doubts, we can see, if you look at the sky, particularly on a day like today in Ireland anyway, you see it is endless, or seems to be endless, and pure because it's just blue. And in terms of those who are celebrating Navaratri, today's color is blue, of course. This is one of the reasons why anybody who read into some of the subtleties of my thought today will pick this up. So an endless blue sky is there. And also the whiteness is there, the white cloth of the Brahmacharini. So it's all connected with the second day of Navaratri. So with a pure mind, how will we get this pure mind? We get a pure mind by removing an identity of a prophet-actor complex called I. If I have that, then I will always lack contentment. I will always feel that I'm in a deficit position, need to gain something. And then the whole search in life becomes looking for that. Looking around the corner, when will I get it? And you pick up spiritual life, the question remains the same. No different from a materialist pursuit. When will I get happiness? When will God come to me? The position of the first beggar that is praying, my life is desperate, can he make it better? And the second one saying, my life is okay, can it be better? But if that entity is both inside and outside, the question doesn't arise. It only a sense of cultivating a sense of contentment to get to that position, that understanding. Who am both inside and outside and unobstructed like the sky. Here you take 13 and 14 together. Somebody who looks like that, what will be his view? Will it be one of deficit? He says, "O great soul, he who, taking his stand on pure knowledge, thus regards and honors all beings as myself, who has the same attitude toward a Chandala, that is the person of lowest birth, removing any differences, therefore, between distinguishing people of low birth, high birth, this condition, that condition, as well as a Brahmana, somebody who is at the height of society, a thief as well as a patron of the Brahmanas. Doesn't matter whether you are virtuous or whether you are full of vice. A spark of fire as well as the sun, a ruffian as well as a kind man is considered a sage. And you can see a jumping theme. You see a spark, it leads you then to sun. Sun leads you to that which lights the sun. That which lights the sun, totality. In 3 jumps you got there. Same thing, Chandala as well as a Brahmana, both have to breathe, both have to eat, both have an occupation, both have the same constitutional advantages and difficulties, both have the same physiology. Can you not then make a jump from there to saying internally there is that entity that is within and without? What we call a body is just a vessel, like a pot. Air is both in and out. A ruffian as well as a kind man. See how we judge. Somebody's kind, somebody's a ruffian. It is difficult to think that man can be anything better than a beast when you study the events of the last century and even events going on today. Can we bypass all of that and see that fundamentally there is a within and without? To make sense of anything, we have to. Because the others will be just motion, fleeting. And Aquinas' second point was to do with causal relationships. And that comes and goes. And that will have its own consequences. And then 15, ideas of rivalry, jealousy, pity, and egoism. Where do ideas of rivalry come from? Why do ideas of jealousy come from? You'll find it not only in your own condition, you'll find it amongst your friends, acquaintances. You'll find it amongst politics. You'll find it amongst all the greed in the world. You'll find it amongst the lack of social compassion and a willingness to uplift a fellow man. All this rivalry, all this jealousy, where does it come from? There's a sequence of events. Egoism, that is the sense of separation. I am this and I have a deficit. They quickly depart from a person who always thinks of me in all men, means in all mankind. We haven't mentioned all the other beings because we have to, if we are to include a totality. And then see the rivalry, etc., concerning his equals, superiors and inferiors, and himself, respectively. That's how we classify things. And then, if we are to have a new attitude, if we are to shift our view and say, no, I don't have to cultivate contentment because what is there is there. What will happen? I will have to completely do away with self-consciousness. That is, consciousness of me as an individuality, because he next says ignoring the derisive smiles of one's friends and leaving aside a merely physical view. Lack of contentment comes because of a physical view. Merely physical view of things, as well as shame, embarrassment. One should prostrate oneself on the ground, full prostration, before every creature, now extending beyond man, every creature, down to a chandala, a cow. Cow is something that is sacred because it represents something that is giving and pouring all the time. God's grace pouring toward us is evidence of God himself. An ass, that is a beast of burden, that is regarded as so inferior, we can load it, everything we can on its back. Or a dog. A dog in this context, something that scavenges, something that barks and bites, something no doubt that can be tamed, but in this concept and in this context, some animal that is seen to be the lowest of the low. One should worship thus in thought, word, and deed, not just in lectures, not just in discussions, not just as a thought, not just as an ideal, not just as a moral concept, and deed, social activity. In countries where, if you go, it's the same in India, of course, but Africa, you go to any urban center in Africa, you stop your car, immediately it's surrounded by children begging in rags. Their homes in urban areas are sometimes in the drains. And they actually, because many of them are orphans because of the AIDS virus epidemic, and now with the COVID, probably even worse. And so how to get some kind of joy in life, whatever small coins they collect, they go and purchase glue and they sniff the glue, and that gives them some kind of euphoria to alleviate their minds from terrible, terrible conditions. So should we not make a move toward that? Should we not try and create an orphanage? Not with the idea of uplifting their physical condition, but with the idea of worship. All this becomes worship, and all work is worship, till one comes to look upon all beings as myself, as myself. You're going through a progression of in and through and as and beyond, as I've said many times. So as myself, a totality. I'm here, not just exclusively in one thing or the other, but as a whole totality present here. Can you not feel it? And if you feel it, will you feel content? So this restlessness of the mind that is associated with longing is an essential component in spiritual life, not for discontent with some things or discontent with progress in spiritual life. That all goes away once the totality concept comes in. But as a process, longing for God is a process. Repetition of a mantra is a process in discernment. And taking work as worship is a process. But when it becomes automatic, habitual, spontaneous, the whole feeling of contentment then comes in, because more the totality is viewed and shown. And when the totality is viewed and shown, a shift in attitude occurs. And you won't worry about the derisive smiles or laughs or ridicule from the others. We have to have a revolutionary spirit. We have to be able to go against the grain. An inner rebel is always a reformer. Nobody or nothing gets reformed unless there's an inner rebellion in you. Somebody prepared to go against a conventional way of thinking and behaving. Then the text goes on, to such a man, everything is Brahman. That is the very highest principle, owing to the knowledge that comes of seeing the Atman in all. Seeing that Brahman all around, he is free from doubts, and then gives up any activities that are done with any form of motive, including striving for any perceived deficit. This looking upon all beings as myself, in thought, word, and deed, repeated again, is to my mind, and Krishna makes this astonishing statement, the best of all methods of worship. The best of all methods of worship. Should we light a lamp? Should we say a particular mantra? Should we do a particular ritual? If we don't do it in this way, will we be doomed? Will people criticize because we didn't do exactly as the Shastra prescribed? This whole idea of doing things according to the law instead of the spirit, every single spiritual revolutionary emphasized the spirit rather than the law. Jesus was asked about the Sabbath. I see why you're healing on the Sabbath. Other people are fasting. Your followers of John the Baptist are fasting. And Sunday, even the Pharisees say we should fast. Everybody should fast. On holy days, people should fast. Are you fasting? Ekadashi days come and go. Did you fast? And then they have a quarrel, which is the best form of fasting. The Muslims say, oh, we fast, we don't even take water. You fast, but you take water. What kind of fasting is that? You fast, you took fruit, you took a little milk. What kind of fasting is that? You took water? And then the reply will be, well, your fasting is only from dawn to dusk. Then you feast. Well, Jesus makes an interesting reply leveled against him by those critical of observing things for the sake of the legality of it. With a broad mind, he says, if the bridegroom is here, the guests of the bridegroom will still feast. In other words, if we think and feel that this ultimate is here and now and present with us, then there is absolutely no necessity to pay any attention to all the rules and regulations. And Vivekananda put it this way, our goal is to do away with law. Our goal is to transcend law. Forget about law. And so, what is the highest form of worship? I repeat it. This looking upon all beings as myself in thought, word, and deed is, to my mind, the best of all methods of worship. What an incredible, astonishing statement What a simple statement. What a practical statement. My dear Uddhava, once begun, there is not the least destruction for the religion concerning me, for it is free from desire. What is something that is free from desire? Is it not contentment? And I have myself adjudged this religion as perfect on account of its being transcendent, not involved in the linear causal relationships that we find in modern science, in the evolutionary theory that ignores completely involution, that doesn't take into account any totality, that sees individuality, sees separateness. Any trifling activity whatsoever, such as that due to fear, etc., if it is unselfishly meant for me, this becomes religion. And herein lies the wisdom of the wise and the cleverness of the intelligent, that in this very birth they attain me, the real and immortal, by means of something that is unreal and mortal. So this is one of the most significant and important statements. We have to try and get back to the original question about the cultivation of contentment. The cultivation itself is a step toward contentment. Starting off from the position of where do we find ourselves now and immediately, and then going on from there and trying to understand this principle of totality. And totality means exactly that. There's a completeness to it. How can we cultivate contentment when everything is complete? So just to summarize a little bit, when we start off with cultivating thankfulness as a first step, by observing carefully all the things around us, God's glory everywhere, and feeling it internally so that there is a tangible shift within us, then there is a feeling of contentment. Now we have some examples for that. Supposing you look out on the sea on a nice day, summer's day, no wind or anything, no need to complain or anything, all the conditions pristine and perfect, looking out at an unlimited horizon. And you may find a sigh of contentment coming by itself. Now, we didn't go down to the beach and say, I have to cultivate contentment. We go down to the beach, observe what is there, and feel contentment as it overwhelms us or as it enters and pervades us. So contentment is something like that. We can feel it coming on us. Now, how did we feel this feeling of contentment? What was necessary? What was necessary was we had to go down to the beach. And the reason why we think we can only get it at the beach is because the same vision at the beach we don't see anywhere else. We have to learn to see that elsewhere. We have to learn to see that in every moving object, in every person, in every place, in every event, in every scene. We have to cultivate that. That's what we have to cultivate. And having seen that and done that, we realize things are complete. Contentment is already available to us here and now. Discontent, which is its opposite, will come by regret for the past, is gone, or anxiety for the future, or a desire that says, I don't have it now, I'll get it. So this is the beauty of this philosophy. We'll say, actually, there is a non-dualistic position which involves a totality. And if we can understand it in principle and then see it in practice as a withinness, then we get whatever we want and we have whatever we want. And the wants are few until the wants are none. So that is what I will have to say. Cultivating thankfulness Thankfulness equals contentment. If I'm thankful for something, it means I've received. I'm a recipient. Thanks. You say thanks. See? Every day, Swami Vimokshananda, in his kindness, supplies me with a free photograph or picture to accompanying my ramblings. And so, even though we're living in the same place, and even though he lives in a room right next door to where I am, and with a very thin plasterboard wall in between, I still put a thanks. Maybe, I hope you have something for this, and thanks in advance. And the hope is a linguistic device, which says, if it's taken in a literal sense, I hope, but there's a possibility that it may not be there. But if you're using the device in a thankful way, saying, I'm pretty sure you have something, and for that I thank you. God digesting our food without our interference, supplying us with free opportunities for mental ramblings and meanderings, giving us a movement in the lungs for breath, giving us the individual opportunity to fulfill a role in the game of life. Should we not at least once or twice be thankful? And then should that thankfulness not expand to a whole attitude of thankfulness? And will that thankfulness then not incorporate by itself contentment? And will that not be a spiritual attitude? And will it not open up for us in a natural way our spiritual life? Yes, it will. Yes, you see, you don't have to cultivate contentment when you're looking at a sunrise or a sunset or a view over the sea or any other delightful scene or participation in nature that automatically gives rise to those kinds of feelings. Listening to a piece of music, for example, listening, for example, to Beethoven's symphonies, doesn't require that we should be content or not. We're simply listening to these things or seeing these things, engaging the senses in an uplifting way. An uplifting way means we've automatically, instinctively caught this divinity within. And as soon as we do that and stand back and ask a question, was I content or not? The answer was you were content. You might explore that and say, well, what were the components to make me content? And then you destroyed the whole thing because you're no longer working on the instinctual level. You're trying to analyze things. And that brings in then another level of discontent, which says, I don't understand it. So rather than do all that, accept it with a sense of thankfulness, adoration, and wonder, and see what happens. And see, oh, the mind is actually settled. It doesn't want to go anywhere. It's like a bee that decides, I will sit on this flower a while, at least for that period of time. It is completely happy and content to sit there. So it is only in the restless mind that we find this discontent. And that is only because we don't have a real attitude or the correct attitude to it. And that in turn is because we don't catch the totality inherent in the instinctual reactions that are there when we observe things that generate contentment. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.